Hello, and welcome to the Real Estate and Business Success Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Jimmerson, your Southeast Alabama luxury realtor with first class real estate wiregrass. In this podcast, we're diving deep into the intersection of real estate and business to uncover what makes successful entrepreneurs tick. Each week, I'll be interviewing top business owners and investors from the Wiregrass region and beyond, exploring how they've achieved enduring success and how their strategies can apply to both real estate and other industries. Whether you're a real estate professional or a business enthusiast, get ready to gain valuable insights, discover new strategies, and elevate your own success. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Real Estate and Business Success Podcast. Thank you for tuning in today, whether you're listening in or watching the video on my YouTube channel, Wiregrass Veteran Realtor. Today, I have with me Dan Murphy, husband, father, recovering addict, and real estate investor. Thanks, Dan, for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. This is fun. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I can't wait to dive in to today's episode and talk about what you have going on. So I think I reached out, found out about you. Was it in Pace Morby's Facebook group, the Creative Real Estate?
Yeah.
Yeah, you made a post about what you got going on, and I think it kind of blew up. Everybody was really interested in hearing what you have to say. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that particular deal, and I'm not a member of like Sub2 or anything like that, but I joined some of those Facebook groups to see what people got going on. And I've just been focused so much in the last 5 years on being a real operator. Like I'm not an influencer. I'm not a podcast guy. I'm just like a real estate operator. That's what I do every day. And then I kind of have done some cool stuff and I decided like, let me share it. And yeah, it was like 1,000 likes and like my Facebook was blowing up and people were like, what are you doing? And it didn't really dawn on me that like, oh, people are going to think this is cool. But yeah, that particular deal is a drug rehab center. So I purchased a property for $250,000 in Athol, Massachusetts, which is when people hear Massachusetts, they think Boston, which is very expensive, but there is parts in central Massachusetts. And the further west you go, it actually becomes relatively inexpensive, but that was a good deal. Just got it off MLS. It was some guy who was running a rooming house. He had like 9 people in it, even though there was 30 rooms. I've always liked the niche portion of real estate because once 2021 hit, I realized the normal residential real estate's tough. Interest rates are going up. People are competing for housing. It's just, we built the real estate model off the 2% model, right? So if I bought a property for 300 grand, I wanted it to pull in 6,000 in rent. And we could do that for a while, but you just can't really do it anymore. And a lot of successful real estate investors I know stopped. So I was like, all right, rooming houses are cool. It's not co-living, but it's, you can get 14 people in a house. The problem is it's a management nightmare, but I was willing to take it on. We bought that property and we filled it. We turned it around. We had 25, 26, 27 people in there. The average rent was like $750 a month. It was great. The problem was I was like a principal of a high school, of like a problem high school. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Was it a full-time job? No. But was I getting some sort of call or building message or every day? Yeah. There was a lot of issues. I had a gun pulled on me there. I've had people fighting, so-and-so sleeping with so-and-so's girlfriend. Everything in the common area is going missing. It is what it is. And then we got in touch with, it was actually the building inspector referred us in this particular case to this behavioral health operator. So this company, this nonprofit out of Gardner, Massachusetts, who runs treatment centers, sober living. And I had already been very familiar. I had actually already done sober living deals, which we'll talk about after, but I had been familiar with the space because I used to shoot heroin. So I have 6 years clean right now. I met my wife in treatment. Very familiar. I've lived in sober houses. I've gone to detox. I know what it's like. Like when it comes to doing drugs, like I said, I'm a real operator. When it comes to doing drugs, it's real deal, bro. And so is my wife. So fentanyl, all that stuff. I'm really glad we're out of that, obviously. But I sort of understood that business. And when I got in touch with Gamma, they originally weren't interested in the property at first, but they said, call me back in a year. We got to raise money, do this, whatever. And then I kind of researched what you can charge these companies, how this deal would look. A year later, I followed up with them. And on my Facebook, I have the video of the CEO talking about like this whole process. It's pretty cool. And they came in and walked the property. They asked for floor plans and I drew them on a whiteboard. Swear to God, it was horrible. I drew them on a whiteboard. I still have the picture of it too. And someone sent it over like, is this a joke? And I was like, dude, I'm just trying to make this happen. And he's like, all right, we'll get some real floor plans. We put it together. And then basically what they came up with is we want to run a licensed treatment center out of here. They're a nonprofit company, so they were exempt from all the zoning. So I was like, well, okay, wow. This is cool. This is actually a reality. Town can't tell us no. So they basically said, look, it's going to be an $800,000 build out. Actually, they said a $550,000 build out. It ended up being 800. But if you're in real estate, you know how that goes.
Oh yeah.
Twice as long and twice as expensive as you expect. But I knew that they were getting reimbursed about $350 a day per patient. And I started researching like what you can charge these companies. And I just threw out a number because I'm like, all right, I bought the property for 250. I have to put 800 into it. So 25 grand a month. And I want a 15-year lease. And they were like, okay. And
Didn't even bat an eye, huh?
I was like, oh man, we got to find 800,000. But that's like that's a big boy, treatment center. The electrician was 200 and something $1,000 just for that.
Awesome, man.
But yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a different real estate strategy than most talk about that's out there. Everybody's into fix and flip and wholesaling and you name it. So this is definitely something interesting that a lot of people don't know about. So, as far as like finding the properties or the deals, like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, because like that deal was a home run. Licensed treatment centers are very difficult to recreate because zoning becomes a big hurdle. Also, typically you're competing with private equity companies. But there's these little subsectors of substance abuse, which is a subsector of behavioral health, like called sober living, where there's a lot of money to be made. And what I did was I built a company where I basically reverse engineer all the deals. So I sent out like an email campaign, which is just me on an iPhone. There was no and I went on like the state certified websites in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, found all the state certified sober living homes and got immediate access to their email and basically said, hi, my name's Dan Murphy. I have 6 years in recovery. Companies like yours saved my life. I appreciate the work you do. I own a real estate company where we'll help you locate, purchase, rehab a property of your choice and simply lease it back to you. That way you can expand your business with no cost to you. I'm not a consultant. I come in, I perform, I buy the house, I outfit it to you. I can create more bedroom space and help you become more profitable. And from there, I'll lease it back to you. And I'm getting much higher than market rate on that. Not quite 25 grand a month, but I'm popping out $300,000 purchases with $6,000 triple net leases on a single family house. Like we're doing that all day long. People don't even know about it.
Well, now they do. Yeah, yeah. Now they will. That's awesome, man. Something that's been brought to like the forefront to me more recently. I think we all kind of know this that are in this, but and on every one of my podcasts. So I guess I just coined my name on the last podcast as the quote man. So I love quotes. And one recently that you're making me think about for real estate investors out there or just anybody in general starting a business is think bigger sooner.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned in the beginning, single family just doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, there is one method that's out there talking about like Section 8, which is kind of along the same guidelines of government money that's out there that can make sense depending on the deal. But just think bigger sooner. Literally had a phone call earlier before we got on here with another guy who's doing industrial commercial, and he's like, man, it's the same thing. Whether you're doing a single family home or industrial commercial or what you're doing, yeah, there's different nuances. But in general, like the same basic principles, the playbook, the guideline, the blueprint, whatever you want to call it, is the same. And there's no difference, but there's a lot more to it. Your return on investment is going to be a whole lot better. But yeah, thanks for that no BS, no fluff, actionable information. That's what we're looking here for on this podcast. So, what
Yeah.
can you kind of give a little backstory about yourself? I mean, I know you did a little bit, but
Yeah, I mean, I grew up like 30 miles north of Boston. I had a good family. I didn't hurt for anything, but I like to party. I like to drink for whatever reason. Worked at a golf course and I would just sneak beers there and drink and party and do all that. And that's just the kind of kid I was. I was a B student, C student. I went to UMass Lowell, but I've always kind of been like, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to make my own money. But I was a douchebag about it. Like I was very like arrogant. Like I thought people who go to school are stupid and why should I learn from people who don't make money? And I get the whole concept, but it's like, kid, you're a nobody. Like, who are you to like disrespect your teachers? I just kind of always had that mindset. It was just an immature mindset, but I always wanted to work for myself and make money and bring value. I just understood that at a young age. Like, we're not getting paid. We're getting paid for the value we bring, right? Like, if you can raise Coca-Cola or if you can raise a mom and pop shop's revenue by 10% with your ads, you're going to make X. If you do it for Coca-Cola, you're going to make X. It's the same work. It's just like, what value are you bringing? So it's like, if I can buy a single family home and create a sober living opportunity where somebody can come in and make $3,000 or $4,000 a month, then rather than renting it for 3,000, I can get 5,500 triple net, because I'm creating the value in the home. The real estate is basically just like the tool that I'm selling towards. Do you know what I'm saying? Wording that right. So I was like, wow, this is pretty cool, because I'm basically creating a commercial real estate company out of all these residential properties. And then what I like about behavioral health or sober living in general is the participants are protected by the Federal Fair Housing Act. So like, it's hard for the cities can't come in. I mean, they can, and we can get into that. They can't technically legally come in and say I'm running an illegal boarding house. We're not. We're protected. People in recovery can't be discriminated against. I just didn't want to run all the recovery homes, because I've lived in them and I've been the pain in the ass, you know what I mean? Who's just like pissing people off. So it's a tough business to run. And those are the people who make the magic happen and actually help people get better. And I love them for it. But, people do not want to lease to sober living homes. Technically, neighbors do not want them in the community. Because I've lived in these homes, I'm like, wait a second, I lived there and they made me do chores. They made me get up at a certain time. They made me go to work. I couldn't have females over the house. I couldn't have overnight stays. I couldn't, like, it was very structured, and the real estate was well taken care of. And there's 16, 18 people in this 3-family all paying $900 a month 5 years ago. So I'm like, there's money in this. Imagine if you could rent a Section 8, and in your lease to a Section 8 tenant, you could say, hey, just so you know, you can't drink, can't do drugs, can't be violent. The average eviction is an hour in a sober house. If someone's acting up, I can throw you out just because you didn't come home by 10 p.m. Right? You got to make your bed. You got to have a job. You'd be like, this is the greatest model on earth. If you tried to put that in a Section 8 lease, you'd go to jail. Well, that's exactly how sober living structured. And I'm like, oh man, the people are missing the boat on this, because people think, oh, I have to run a sober living home. No, you can provide the real estate to the sober living. Now, you can also provide real estate to drug detoxes and treatment centers, and there's a ton of money in that. It's just, for most of your listeners, that's just a bigger learning curve. Obviously, it's the attention getter, because it's like, oh my God, he's making 18 grand a month off $1 million purchase, because those are the real numbers. But it's not the easiest thing to recreate, but you're like, hey, he's getting 50% cash on cash return on a $225,000 property because he leased it triple net for $3,900 a month, because someone else leased it and is charging 12 people $1,000 a month to live there, and giving them a good structure. And you're doing something good for the community, and they're protected by the Federal Fair Housing. So it's like, and it's non-cyclical, right? If you're doing drugs, and I can say this because I've done drugs, Trump, Kamala, if the Fed raises interest rates or drops them, I'm still getting high, right? Like, it doesn't matter. No one's a raging alcoholic and goes, oh my God, the Fed just raised the kids. I think I need to put the bottle down. It doesn't work that way. It's actually the other way around. COVID, look at the numbers. From 2014 to 2018, overdose rates skyrocketed. And then from 2018 to 2020, they went up like another 30%. So basically, the worse the world is, the more this business booms. Now, I don't like to say it like that, because obviously it means it's bad, but it's more the service needs. Like, it's not like Airbnb, where when things are tightening up in the economy, this business is going to fail. It's actually the other way around. And what's really screwed up about drugs and alcohol is you do it when things are bad, and you kind of do it when things are good. We can party because we're feeling good, or we can drink because we're sad. So it's an unfortunate reality in the life, but to be a part of the solution and have this concrete business model that makes sense, that no one's doing it. I knew it was a good idea, because when I started Googling this, like, I'm trying to find a guy like me to help me do it, and it doesn't exist. I was like, holy crap,
Yeah, it's awesome, man, that you're taking what you've been through in life and now you're flipping it on its end and coming around and trying to help those that are in the same situation, because you can relate to that. But just so happens to be that it's a massive opportunity that needs to be solved. And you're right, good or bad, it's always going to be going on. And like you said, it just is what it is. It's the reality of the world and what's out there. And what better way than to try to help make it better? And that's all about having a win for everybody, right? I mean, everybody wins in that situation, is what it sounds like. So what got you into real estate?
So that's a good question. And this is a part of my story I'll never hide. So when I first got sober, my wife did it. She wasn't my wife at the time. I met her in treatment. We were both in a sober house. I was in the men, she was in the women. I went and I was hanging out in the women's house, and they caught us, and I got thrown out of the program, dude. Like, it was horrible. And I ended up just still hanging out with her, because I'm 26 years old at that time, because I'm 32 now. I had no job. we're hanging out at her house, and like she's got like a really nice house. Oh wow, this is nice. And I knew her father would go to Athol in Central Mass all the time. I didn't know why. I'd usually try to leave before her father got home because I'm 26, man. We're not kids anymore. It's like, what are you doing all day, you know? But her family's very loving, very Italian. My wife struggled. My wife actually didn't get sober right away. It took her like another year. She wasn't getting high every day, but there were these relapses, and she was on probation. And she actually violated probation by failing a drug test and got arrested for that. So I was with her mom. She had only known me for 60 days, her mom. All she knew was I was the guy that got kicked out of treatment together. But they were so broken down and beaten that like she wanted me to go with her. So I was driving to Framingham State Prison. In Massachusetts, there's no jail, it's just prison. So we're visiting this girl from a good family, which we'll talk about in a second. And she's there with like a Brockton baby killer. She's eating lunch with this woman who drowned her 5 children. And it's like, this is where drugs lead you. But I found out her father-in-law owns quite a bit of real estate. So that's how I got introduced to real estate, was in that 2018-19. I wasn't given any money in terms of here's like cash, you can just have it. But I had access to investors because my father-in-law owned a portfolio. And I thought it was great. And I was the guy who was like, dude, I'm going to buy a couple 3 families and retire. It's like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about, right? It's like, how about you buy 30 of them, wait 10 years, and now you're like, that's like more accurate. But I didn't know at the time. And then what kind of panicked me is in 2021 is when I noticed my father-in-law, because he had plans to, he wanted to go to 1,000 units, and because they had a couple hundred at the time. And I realized like they're not buying anything anymore because nothing's working. So I'm like, what does that mean for me? Because like I'm not really making any money. So that's when I got creative and actually picked up the phone, because I probably owned like 2 or 3 families, which in reality, my father-in-law owns 50% of my company still, because I've kind of grown this whole behavioral health thing. I've long paid him back, let me tell you. But we'll just leave it at that. But I kind of realized, oh man, we got to do something different or I'm not going to be able to grow. So that's when I actually picked up the phone and called some of the sober living operators that I used to live in and said, hey, like, why don't you guys expand? Like, oh, we don't have money to do that. I'm like, all right, well, do you own the house or do you lease the house? And they're all saying, I own one and I lease one, or I lease them, I lease them, I lease them, I lease them. I'm like, from who? And they're like, Joe Blow landlord. You know what I mean? And then I start hearing the stories, but it sucks because they find out what we're making and then they try to charge more money, or they find out that there's drug addicts in the house and they try to kick us out, or they have me on a 1-year lease and the guy gets divorced and then he wants to sell the property and now my business is gone. All these things. The city came in and said we need a $17,000 fire alarm. So now the owner of the property doesn't want to put it in. So it was all these like issues. And I'm like, you know what? Let's create a company, work with them. I'll buy the property for you. I'll fix it up how you want, meaning like I'll finish out the basement, put in egress windows, put in a fire alarm, build tons of value for you as the operator, give you a long-term lease. That way you're protected. I'm not going to get rid of you. I'm going to charge a good amount of money for this lease. So, I don't want to get rid of you. I don't want to sell the property. You mean something to me. You're not a market rate tenant. You're someone that means something to me. Also, I understand sober living. I know you're a fantastic tenant, and I understand the numbers and how it's going to have to, work. Oh, by the way, I'll give you a turnkey business, 1 month free, 1% rent increase, and no first last security. So 1 month deposit, 1% rent increase, in your first month free to help you get going. I get the money on the back end and it's long term. And I've built this company of 18, 20, however many there are now, where we're crushing it. Like all these houses are cash flowing $2,000-$3,000 a month on sub $500,000 purchases. And that's all at 7% interest. And I've pulled my money out of every deal. Because once I do the commercial lease, that $300,000 house that you have a $6,000 lease on, you run that commercial lease, the appraiser comes back in at $600,000 and the bank calls you flipping out. Like, dude, are you going to pull all this money out? I'm like, no, I just want to pull out the purchase price. But I'm able to burr every single deal. I bought a property for $1.25, leased it for $4,500 a month. The commercial appraisal came in at $600,000. The friggin', because it was a 10-year lease. The bank called me in like a panic, like, we can't give you all that. I'm like, dude, I want 2.25. They're like, oh, okay. Because the building was only worth $350, but I made it worth $600. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like how it got started. I know it was a long answer, but I come
love it.
from a real estate family, and I'll never deny that advantage of being connected to investors.
That's awesome, man. I mean, it's lucky, and that word gets thrown around a lot, but I mean, you could have done nothing with it, right? You could have gone nowhere instead of you saw an opportunity and decided to learn about it. Along with what you just said, I love how, again, going back to you're making it a win for everybody, and that's how you make it in business in general, whether real estate or whatever business you are, is it's not just all about you. It's not how can I get over on people. It's how does this make sense? You're not just, you could take this a whole nother way, right? And they'd probably still accept it, but you're really creating something long term that's going to be there. And they feel it's a no-brainer for them, right? It's hard for them to say no compared to what they've already experienced, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just had a settlement with a city where I got a permit. The neighbors appealed the permit. I bought the house for this girl. She's going to run a sober house out of it. I got the permit for it. Everything was legal. Then the neighbors appealed the permit and went in front of zoning. Zoning just said, no, you can't do it. It's a halfway house, which it's not. Halfway house are licensed. Halfway houses treat on site. That's the difference between an inpatient treatment center and a detox center in sober living, is those particular places treat their people via clinicians, nurses on site. If you treat somebody on site where they sleep, you're into a totally different ballgame of zoning. You're not just protected by fair housing. It needs to make sense, the location of the property, the zoning of the property. But with sober living, you're just an unrelated family. So there is life safety code stuff. Like if you're going to put 12 people in a single family house and you live in Massachusetts, you need to put a sprinkler system in. But you can get those done. You can put 2 tanks in the basement. They're 25, 30 grand. It sucks to do, but it is what it is. Might be a $15,000 fire alarm. But remember, these are all things other landlords don't know and aren't going to do. So when you ask me why is this house you could only rent for 3,800, why are you getting 5,500? Because like, look at what we're doing. I'm willing to put a sprinkler system in a single family house for you, right? So I don't say it like that, but they start to understand like, oh my God, you're like on my team. Because what happens if you lease the house for 3,500 and the city comes knocking and goes, you need a sprinkler system? That landlord's going to go put it in. Now your whole business is gone. You might have employees. You got people living there. I hope you have 50 grand laying around. We take on all that risk. But that city basically shut us down, and it was an 8-month process. And I ended up beating them. They had to settle with me and write me a check for $40,000. And then the house opened up. I paid the mortgage the whole time. Actually, the operator put a deposit down. And then we had this awkward conversation. She called me and she's like, hey, I know this is going to be like a long legal battle. Can I have the deposit back? I'm like, of course. Like, we just treat people really good when we're taking on a lot of risk. If you want to get into, if we have time, I've been burned doing this too. But for the most part, we take on all the upfront risk and then we really win long term. That is the whole business model that we're doing. But yeah, we're here, like you said, when we are in the operator's corner, because that's how I pitch it to them. You guys work tirelessly day in and day out to serve these clients, people like me who have nowhere to go. And there's nobody fighting for you. The banks don't understand what you do. The landlords don't understand what you do. The neighbors don't understand what you do, but we understand what you do. And we're capital backed and we have all the right lawyers and we can go to bat and help make your dream of opening another one a reality. And we get paid for it.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, talk about forced appreciation. That word's thrown around that you're really taking it to a whole new level with what you do, and we got plenty of time, so dive right into it. Whatever you want to talk about, feel free.
Yeah, and there's so many layers to this. Like, there's also companies that own, and I'm in talks with a really big deal, very similar to that other one, but it's not done, so I won't say it. But very similar to that other one that I did, where it's they call it out of network. So you got the in network, which is like Mass Health. They get reimbursed like $300 or $400 a day to run a treatment.
Insurance.
And then you got like out of network, which is like the Blue Cross Blue Shield. So these are all owned by private equity companies. So they might get reimbursed $2,000 a day. It's like 800 a day, right? So you can imagine like they don't mind paying these big money. They just need a place for people to go, right? If you were an Uber driver and you didn't have a car and you knew you could do 5 rides today and you were going to get paid $2,000 for each ride, would you go rent a Lamborghini for $2,000 a day? Of course you would, because you're going to go make $10,000. So it's like, if you're able to go in and buy property for them fast, now you might need money and access to investors, solve their problem, understand what they're looking for, and make it happen. You're worth it's not about the property. It's the value you're bringing to their company. The property's irrelevant. You know what I mean? That's these companies that, yes, they treat people on site at their detoxes, but then they need places for people to go as part of the continuum of care. And a lot of times what these big treatment centers do is they call random Joe Schmo sober living owner Say Ben owns Sober Living and says, hey, can I reserve 10 beds for you, right? From you. So that's 10 beds is $8,000 a month that they're going to pay just to reserve. And then they call another guy and you might say, I only got 6. All right, I'll reserve 6. And then they call another guy, hey, can we reserve 6 beds? So now they're paying $10,000 a month. So when I call them and I say, I'll get you a 15-bed house for $7,500, $8,000, $9,000 a month, they're like, sure, we just need the beds. I've even we're in talks of deals of, it's not even treatment, but they are the treatment guys of $1 million purchases and $20,000 leases because I can get 30 guys in the house, put the sprinkler in, do everything. You're just worth so much money. They're making too much money and they have too much overhead to have that on the balance sheet. They don't want to deal with talking to cities. They don't want to deal with sprinkler systems. They just want to be like, where can I put my people? And here you go. And that stuff's out there and you can do it. And that's not even the most lucrative portion of this business, to be honest with you. But that one's pretty good too.
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense. They want to focus on the business and not the real estate aspect of it. That's just like any business owner in general. Everybody eventually wants to work on the business instead of in the business. And so you're kind of helping let them do that to be able to work on the business instead of in it and dealing with all the other aspects of it that they didn't really sign up for. They're trying to do their job and not figure out all the intricacies of zoning in the city and dealing with everybody through the real estate aspect of it. Yeah, I meant to say this earlier. I'm glad that you and your wife made it through and that you guys are here today so you can spread this message, spread this word, but just in general, you guys you didn't give up. I've been talking about that a lot lately of not giving up. You never know where you're at. You might be right there and you just got to keep going and not give up because that breakthrough is going to come.
Yeah, one in 17 Americans struggle with substance abuse. So I would bet $1 million liquid cash that someone is going to watch this podcast, probably multiple people who are struggling with active addiction. And if you want to talk about family members or close friends of family members, someone watching this has lost a loved one to addiction. Someone watching this may be crying right now because I'm saying this. That's how close to home it is. When the COVID thing blew up, and I'm sure people died of COVID, I'll never deny that. I don't know all the statistics, but you saw how it became this big global thing, but no one really talks about like all these kids that are growing up with no parents. Like my kids are so lucky they have parents. Like my wife overdosed and blew on the floor. Like she's the best mother in the world. It's just, it takes good people and it destroys them. It absolutely destroys them. And yeah, there's a need for this treatment stuff. And I never try to pretend like I'm some sort of philanthropist but what we do is a good service because I'm a big believer in you don't make money unless you provide a good service, unless you're doing some like illegal stuff. But yeah, you're right. We are very lucky, and I appreciate your kind words because there are so many people dead. It's unbelievable. If there was a disease, like, and I know they say addiction's a disease, but if there was like, if Ebola came in and killed 100,000 people this year, like drug addiction's going to do, it kills 100,000. If you do a rolling 12 for the last 3 or 4 years, over 100,000, and mostly young people do, right? So imagine if something came in and killed 100,000 young Americans for 5 years in a row. I mean, nobody would go outside. Talk about a mask. Nobody would ever go outside ever. So but no one's really talking about it because with addiction comes theft and other criminal activity, which I understand. I'm the harshest one. When I was dealing with my wife, I was saying some harsh stuff. Even her family was looking to me at guidance, which helped me get sober because they were a successful family. And they were looking at me like, how do we help this girl? And I'm just this loser, right? Realistically, in 2018, I was just a loser. But they were looking at me like, you understand this. And what was I able to bring them? Value. Because I'm like, because they'd look at me like, is she high? It's like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? Like, she's gone. Like, this is what's going on and kind of giving her tough love. I'm very tough on addicts when it comes to, hey, like, grow up. This is what you need to do. But at the same time, I can relate to driving in a car, crying, not knowing why. I've been clean 30 days. Like, I don't know why I'm going to buy drugs, but I'm going to go do it. And I'm going to just destroy everything once again, so many times. And I've done it so many times. So I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah, I get passionate about it.
No, man, that's great. I ramble all you want. I love when somebody's passionate about something. I got chills earlier just listening to all this. It's like this is a great episode. I'm glad that I saw your post and commented on there and told you to book on the podcast because anybody listening into this, even if you're not getting into business or real estate, but if you can relate to the addiction side, maybe I hope this is the talk, the video, the episode that changes everything for you, even just getting out of being addicted to drugs and alcohol or whatever addiction it is that you have. And hopefully this will give you some hope and make some changes.
Yeah, me. So put it this way: I came up, my brother. I have one sibling. We both struggled with substance abuse. He had some mental health issues as well that he's overcome, and everything's good there. And then my father-in-law has four children, or my in-laws, my wife being one of them, and then her sister also struggled with alcohol. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's like these are two normal families. Both parents still married, both parents working, both parents successful, financially more her family than mine. But my dad makes a good living as an MRI tech, and my mom's always worked. Like I had Christmas presents every year. I had coats. It's cold up here in Boston. I never heard for nothing. And it's just like both your kids get into drugs, and then two out of her, like, and these are just families that grew up right down the street. The whole crew I hung out with when I was kids all started doing drugs. This was even before. It's like I said, 1 out of 17. So like when you really conceptualize, and that's why I get so frustrated when these neighbors are like, one of the houses that I did in Nashua where there was we had to like sue them and everything. There was a sign in this woman's yard that said BG Parents. Bishop Girton is a high school in Nashua. They're putting another sober house in this neighborhood. Blah 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 blah. And in my head, I'm like, you do understand that like these sober houses are filled with BG students. Like, who do you think is, because they were like, we already have 76 sober houses. And all of your listeners can look this up. Nashua, New Hampshire has 76 certified sober houses. The population is less than 100,000. You know what Nashua, New Hampshire got rated on the safe city list in all of America last year? Number one. Number one. The most. So it's like, what are you talking about? Every time, if you have children, man, go to the soccer game and really conceptualize the fact that when you watch these two teams playing, someone on that field is going to die of addiction. All these little 6-year-olds. And I'm not saying that to like make you cry or anything like that, but that's the reality. And if not that, one of their dads is. It's really screwed up, and people just aren't really talking about it. And then people go, oh, they think a sober house comes to town and their kids are going to go missing. It's like, what are you talking about? It's like your kids are the future people who are going to be living in sober living. Now, I'm not saying there aren't bad eggs, but there's bad doctors and bad lawyers and bad rappers like Diddy, whatever. There's bad eggs out there. And if you are a neighbor, I'm not saying sober living is the greatest thing to come to town. Like, would I prefer my next door neighbor not be a sober living house? Sure. Like, I totally understand that. Just like I'd prefer they don't have 12 kids. I prefer my neighbor not have motorcycles because they're loud. But like, I'm not going to flip out about it. It's not a big deal. And that's what I don't think these people understand is they just think drugs and they just think like homeless guy under a bridge. And it's like, man, how many people have to die for you people to wake up, you know?
Yeah, it's crazy that they're not talking about it, but I'm sure there's some underlying reason that involves the government and money and control and greed. They're all maybe I'm just talking out of my mouth. There's always something along those lines, but society as a whole, man, I can go down that rabbit hole all day. I hate even using that word because whoever, whether the government or whatever, some group has created these outlooks, these views on certain things, and talking about this specifically, like you have been, of people look at it and have a negative connotation towards it, but they're literally trying to fix a problem and solve it. Like that's people that are there that are trying to make things better, and people have a problem with that. And like you mentioned, kind of rightfully so, because they know what's going on and what could happen. But just think like if people thought 180 the other way and they were supportive of it, I bet that people would progress a whole lot better if it was talked about more and more people were supportive instead of hearing that it's coming into a neighborhood and they're like, oh my God, here we go. I'm not for this. And they go show up to vote it away and try to not have it there instead of reaching out and getting a better perspective. This is maybe I don't go too far down the rabbit hole, but it just makes me think about something that I really hate. Society in general, they read, listen to, watch whatever, and then just form an opinion. But yet they never reach out. They never do any real research or studying or asking the people that they need to ask that are going through it and dealing with it to get some more understanding and have some empathy with what's going on to really understand. They just, like I said, see, watch, listen to something, form their opinion, and now they're that way. And most people just get stuck like that for the rest of their life. That's like forming an opinion about somebody just because you heard it from somebody else, but you never even talked to that person. There's always two sides to the story or three sides to the story, right? Each other's story. And then if you put those together and mix them up, you'll find out the actual real answer. So like that gets me fired up is just how like society is and people are and how they think. And if they would just take some time to actually dig into the situation, their eyes and their mind might actually be opened up a little bit
Yeah.
more.
No, I love that. And I like that we're kind of getting off real estate a little bit because, like, mark my words, have you ever heard of DraftKings and all that?
Oh yeah.
Listen, when in 1999, Purdue Pharma and all these they released oxycodone, right? And which is, it came under the brand. Oxycodone is like the chemical formula. Oxycontin is what they sold in 80 milligram pills. And basically, what that did is that bridged the gap between like middle America and heroin, right? So, because like typically heroin was like what Kurt Cobain, Ozzy Osbourne, and homeless people. Now they release these little pills and they're selling them like crazy, right? And they're talking about how it's not addictive and you just bump your head and it's just heroin, man. I've done them both. I've smoked 30 milligram oxycodone pills off tinfoil until my teeth rotted out of my head. That is the reality of it, man. And like, it is the same thing as heroin. It is on a chemical level and certainly the way it makes you feel. But what that did was in Drake, Massachusetts, Lowell, Massachusetts, a kid who grew up like me, I never would have done heroin. I knew that was bad, but I didn't know like how bad this little blue pill really was. And that's what bridged the gap. And now they got this sports gambling stuff, right? So you're taking these kids from middle America and now they're snorting these pills and they're basically just like heroin addicts, like all over the football team. That's what happened. And then the same thing is happening with gambling. And believe it or not, the suicide rates on gambling addiction is higher than substance abuse. Granted, a lot of drug addicts just die, but it's bad. And now typically when you think of a gambling addict, what do you think of? You think of a guy who like leaves his family at 6 p.m., doesn't come home for dinner, and gambles the deed of his house away at Foxwoods. No, you know what the gambling addict is now? It's a 23-year-old kid watching the Celtics, sitting on his phone. I've had people call me, hey, can I get $15,000 because like I'm in gambling debt? And it was actually a friend. He called one of my friends had a buddy call him and was like, yeah, like I owe this guy 15 grand. And like, I have the money, but like my dad like has access to my bank account and I just want to like pay him and then like I'll slowly like it's just a story that doesn't make any sense. It reminds me of the drug addicts. The drug addicts do the same thing. It's 1 a.m. Where are you going? I'm going on a walk. I remember telling my mother, I'm going on a walk. You're going on a walk? Like, dude, you don't walk out. Like, what are you talking about? You're just not making sense. And you start lying and then you get angry. What do you mean? How come I'm not allowed to go on a walk? I'm noticing that. And mark my words, gambling issues are going to explode. I don't know if there'll be gambling houses, but I see it. I can't you go hang out and watch a UFC fight with 12 dudes. They're all gambling, especially young people, Have you noticed anything like that?
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, I've seen it. I mean, I know bookies. I've never done it myself. I thought about doing it, but always I was like, I don't know enough about this. I'm going to get myself in a situation that I don't even need to get myself into. But yeah, I know it. I noticed it, man. I'm glad you said that. I didn't even think about that. One thing that you can take away, I don't know if you consider this a good thing or not, between drug addicts and people that gamble on the business aspect of it is they sure do know how to figure something out and get something done. When they're looking for what to get their fix or get whatever it is they need, they're definitely going to figure it out. So you can apply that towards business, and that's just the way business is. You got to figure it out. You've got to build the plane in the air. It's in-flight missile repair.
Yeah, I mean, once you destroy your own life, it's kind of easy, right? Because like I grew up like thinking you got to get good grades, you got to go to college, and college is great. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not anti-college. I'm anti getting into a lot of debt in college, and I'm definitely like I understand you don't really learn a whole lot about the real world, but I also understand the dangers of being an 18 to 25-year-old male. Now, you could say the same thing for female. I talk in terms of gender because I am a male, so I can relate. It's no, but the reality is, go look at the suicide rates. It's way more men. Go look at the addiction rates. Way more men. Go look at the homelessness rates. Way more men. If you want to open a sober living, everyone says open a men's house. It's easier to fill. It's just like, so that's why I'm saying like that. But yeah, there's all these problems out there. I can't remember where I was going with that now, but yeah, it's like, men are struggling in general with all these different types of disorders and things like that at significantly higher rates than women, which I think is interesting. But anyway, go ahead.
No, that's interesting facts, but I absolutely believe it. May lose some people on this, but I don't care because this is about the real and the raw, whether real estate business or life in general. And I believe it. because of the way it is in society, for men, not to take away from women at all, but I just feel like there's a huge burden on men, and it's gotten worse and worse. And this expectation of what they're supposed to do, what they're not supposed to do, and a lot of people aren't grateful for it. I wish I could remember the video or whatever it is I heard or watched, but it was so good just talking about how people look at men and then how much they expect of them.
Sure.
And they don't realize what kind of burden it's putting on them. And that's why there is higher suicide rates for men, because nobody really appreciates it, right? Everybody adore women and children, but then just expect everything from a man.
Yeah, there's some truth to that. And then too many men in the to put it back on men, because I think everything you just said is true, but to put it back on men, too many men are just emotional. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like people like to say women are more emotional than men. And it depends. How do you define emotion? Is it crying hysterically while watching a movie? Is it crying? Well, then sure. But like, go look at the murder rates. Like, you trying to tell me like killing someone over road rage doesn't make you an emotional crybaby? You know what I mean? So like men nowadays are like very emotional creatures, and they're kind of pushing to feminize men. Like we know that, and just make men like a little bit more. It is what it is. It's not even like a political statement anymore. It just is what it is. Men aren't as stoic anymore, and that's okay. And that's what's kind of good about business too. To tie it all in is when I first started this, I was super emotional, especially real estate, because it's such a long game that like I was very emotional when like a tenant didn't pay or a city came in. This city comes in and they shut my house down illegally. I'm like, dude, I am at the zoning board meeting. I want to literally strangle these people. Now, man, I'm just like, whatever. I just wake up, see what the bad news is, handle everything, move on. It is what it is. I'm gonna be dead someday anyway. You know what I mean? Like I just don't really
Yeah.
stress about it. I've become so much more stoic in that. When I did my podcast and I'm like I'm trying to edit this thing and Adobe Premiere Pro won't. I still catch myself being like super emotional with things like that. But you're right. As a man, we do take on a lot of responsibility. And but I also think some of that's come from the fact that like there are a lot of women out there who just get so many men just suck, and they put women in this position where that it's so much swung the other way, where now the women are kind of thinking like that whole movement, right? Like, I don't need a man. I don't need a man. Like, what are you talking about? Of course you do. Just like I need my wife. Dude, I can't even. I love my kids. When I'm at home with I got three kids. The two girls, especially the 6 month old and the 3 year old. Bro, I am so lost. It is so hard. I love them, but I'm like, how do you do this? My wife stays home. How do you do this all day long? I would rather build a retaining wall. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
for sure, man.
it's
Yeah.
easier for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole purpose of men and women is like we do have things that are set out for each other. One's going to be better at something than the other is just because of how we're made and our nature is. And to go along with what you were saying earlier about women thinking that they don't need another man, because yeah, a lot of men do suck nowadays, and I think that's a lot to do with society and technology and the way things have been forced upon the world, and they're trying to take it that route. But because men suck, women are having to step up and kind of take a man's role. And so that's where all that comes from.
Yeah, because for every woman that's like loud and obnoxious and saying stuff like that, there is a woman out there that's like supporting some bum dude. You know what I mean? Like that is out there a lot. And then usually the women who respect, not always, but the women who like respect the man's role and the man who appreciates the woman, like they end up like together. And then the other people just go through like these cycles of this like really sweet girl or whatever, just keeps like dating this like loser and then dates another loser and another one. And then same thing on the other side. You get these guys who they just can't figure out like what like a real, not to coin like an Andrew Tate phrase, but like high value woman is. And they just keep falling for the hedonistic, not that I want to knock an Instagram model, but like that kind of stuff. It's just all about looks and this type of, and they just get themselves screwed over and over again. And you can't see why it is.
Yeah. No, and I agree with you that men are more emotional nowadays because just like you, I've had to learn how to control my emotions, especially in business, because it is anything in business is a long game. The only thing that's not a long game, going back to what you mentioned earlier, is if you're doing something illegal, yeah, you can make some money quick, but it's going to be short term if you're doing something illegal, but you can make just as good of money, but it's going to take a little bit longer in business. It just takes time. You got to have patience. You got to be able to persevere and push through and see your vision through till you get there.
Yeah. Are you married with kids?
I'm not married, but I just got engaged. I do have two kids of my own.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. Same to you. They're a blessing for sure. One's 12, one's 4, and then I'm gonna have two step kids. One's 17 and one just turned 16.
Nice. You got like the Brady Bunch going on. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, it's tough. That's good though that you guys are together and with, sticking it out. But these kids need parents. I know that's the thing no one's talking about, the two-parent household, and people don't want to talk about that. You gotta People go through divorce, especially when they have children's young, stuff happens, but like you gotta be there for those kids as much as you can.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a whole nother topic for another day for sure. A lot to talk about there. In general, there's a lot of things that are not being talked about. But speaking of kids, my pretty sure it was my first job. My first job was working at the local Boys and Girls Club, and I still think about that to this day. I absolutely loved doing that, being as young as I was, and I think I was still in high school. Yeah, I was still in high school when I started that job, and I would literally leave school and go there and start working. And I was basically at a super young age a mentor for kids, and that Boys and Girls Club is still thriving. It's in Ozark, Alabama, doing really good. The program director now, she's killing it and helping a lot of kids. I just remember a lot about that. There was this one kid there that was really struggling. Obviously, you could tell there's stuff going on at home, but for some reason, he just like really took to me, really trusted me. Probably because it's the same way that I try to talk to everybody is going back to what I said earlier. A lot of people don't sit down with the actual source and talk to them or do any research. And whereas was probably used to be getting yelled at, nobody was listening to him, even though he's a kid. This really irritates me. A lot of people think kids don't know. Yeah, right. They know a lot. They know a lot more than what you think. And if you'll just sit down with them calmly and kind of talk to them like they're an adult, right? Show them some respect and ask them some questions and then try to guide them to understand because they are a kid. So yeah, they don't know everything, but they do know you can open their eyes and their brain to understand. And so he kind of just really took to me. But one day I'll never forget, I wasn't in the gym at the time and something happened with another kid and he just took off and ran outside and said he was going to run away. And the staff came to me because they knew I had a relationship with him and like, hey, can you go handle this for us? And I ran outside, chased him down and stopped him and kind of talked him down from what was going on inside of his mind. And he went back inside and everything was all good. Kind of wish I knew where that kid was now.
Yeah, no, it happens. It's funny you say that because that happens a lot in treatment centers. Like even with grown men, I remember because you're in a treatment center, you are allowed to leave unless you're in like a locked detox. Or sometimes you can get in for multiple of reasons if you threaten to commit suicide or something like that. But you can leave, but they're very good. They're skilled at helping you stay because you can leave. They call it AMA. I AMA'd out of rehab. It's called against medical advice, but I remember like a few times being like, I'm out of here. And I'm up in Effingham, New Hampshire in the middle of nowhere. And this was where my mind was at the time. Like, I'm like, there, my whole family wants me. I just can't take it anymore. Like, I got to get out of this place. And I'd have nowhere to go. And this guy was like talking to me. And he's like, Dan, what's your plan, man? Like, where are you going? Because they keep your phone and everything. And I'm like, I don't give a shit, bro. I'm like, I'm going to jump that fence. I'm going to walk out. He's like, where are you going to walk? I'm like, I'm going to lay down in the middle of the road, literally in the middle of the road, because someone's going to stop and call 911. And then I'm going to get on, I'm going to take that to, they're going to bring me to the hospital and I'm going to call my mother. And they're just like, bro, do you know how insane you actually sound? But it was good. They were talking to me like you were talking to that child, like just trying to break through, like what's really going on, right? Because it's just like, I don't know, man. I'm just anxious and I'm stressed and I hate my life and I hate that I'm here. But it's like, where are you going to go, right? And you can become very immature when you're on drugs, but I think it's great that you were working at the youth groups and stuff because the kids need that more than anything because they're not fully developed. Unfortunately, that's just I wasn't fully developed at 25. you know.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's story is different. It just depends on what you go through in life and if you get lucky and somebody stops to care about you for a second and have that conversation. I mean, that's another not talked about enough situation of mental health in general in this country and the world. And the biggest part of that is communication, right? The things that actually matter in life, it doesn't get taught in school, right? Like literally nothing that actually truly matters gets taught in school. So now you're trying to figure it out when you get out in the real world, when you become an adult at 18 or whatever. And if you don't have somebody there, if your parents aren't doing it, then you can easily get lost, and it can take you longer than somebody else to get to the same place that they went, just because of a different path that was presented for them or that they decided to go to.
Yep. I completely agree, man.
So if people want to learn more about what you got going on, how would they do that?
Yeah, what's pretty cool is I actually opened up, I don't know if you're familiar with School,
Oh
the
yeah.
platform. So www.school, which is SKOOL. I'm sure you'll leave a link.com/real estate goldmine. I actually opened up a school account. What's cool is I don't know how to sell stuff. I don't know how to. So right now I'm giving away a lot of this information for free. I've had the school group open for 2 weeks. I already got people meeting operators and potentially doing deals. There's like 200 people in it. My attention's getting pulled in all these different directions. And eventually I'll find a way to monetize that and figure that out. But for now, I'm just doing the Alex Harmozy route. And I'm just going to give so much value to people because I'm like walking through. This guy was on the phone with an operator down in Georgia, and I'm just selling the whole thing. You know what I mean? Of like, this is what we do, blah, blah, blah. Now he wants to partner with me on it, and you got to work out that. So I'll get opportunities through that. But right now it's free because I wanted to prove it could work. I need success stories. So if you're someone who is passionate about sober living, or you're someone who's just passionate about 45% cash on cash return, then, hit up my school group because I can show you how to do it.
And so for everybody listening in, that's School, SKOL. They have an app. It's on the internet too as well, so you can pull it up either way. But if you download the school app, SKL, and then you can just search real estate gold mine, and you'll see that Dan Murphy owns and runs it. And you'll just click join, and you'll be able to get into his group. School's pretty awesome. I love that you mentioned Hormozy. I was going to joke he's doing a happy dance right now since you're using School, because there's
I
so
love
many.
school. I think
Yeah,
Harmozy is great. And that's kind of the model I'm taking. Is like, I just want to give away so much value because I'm seeing it. The people who are coming over from the sub two community are like, I can't believe you're like actually teaching like the implementation of this and you're not charging any money. And it's like, eventually I will, but I need the thought of taking $250 from someone, right? Like a real estate group, that's probably where you'd price it, $250 a month. Cause like I want serious people in there. But the thought of me taking that from someone and not being able to help them if they're genuinely trying to help themselves petrifies me. Being a fraud, being someone who can't provide value scares me. So I just need a few success stories to help grow it. It is becoming difficult because I'm doing like one-on-one Zoom calls with people, teaching them how to do this for nothing. Because now they're all like, dude, this guy's the man. So that's kind of my long-term goal is to just, right, like the Gary Vaynerchuk, jab, jab, right hook. I don't need to sell a
yeah,
high-ticket item. I already got people calling me like, will you work more directly with me if I pay you? Right. So that's kind of the vibe I'm giving because there's only so much I can provide via school, but I can help you do deals, especially while I'm small, and keep spreading the word because I want people to be like, dude, this is like a young Pace Morby, but he hasn't blown up yet.
yeah. I mean, you definitely got something going on. That's why immediately when I saw your post, I had to reach out and saw the reaction going on. And then that dude was jokingly commenting about, "Do you have a podcast?" And you guys mentioned not, and I was like, "Here you go."
Yeah, and like
Yeah,
Facebook comes right to me, bro. Like I'm not some famous guy. And yeah, like that deal, that big deal in Athol, 100% real. Like I could show, actually, you can Google it, but it's good. And you're a realtor. You can even look up who owns it. The LLC that
yeah,
owns it, which would be us at New Life. So it's pretty cool. And we're recreating these, and it's only going to grow. I've only been doing this 18 months in this particular field. Um,
yeah.
and
I love it, man. Yeah, I appreciate having you on the podcast today. Other than School, the real estate gold mine, how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, they can also find me on my Facebook, Dan Murphy. The only problem is there's like 600,000 Dan Murphys, like in just the Eastern United States. But, and then my Instagram name is Daniel Michael Murphy, which is kind of fun because I got some old podcast clips. If you haven't checked out my Instagram, then you should. Because when I ran the podcast, I'm a pretty wild guy, dude, because of just my past. And it's pretty fun because it wasn't just real estate. We were talking real estate. We were just talking about, and we had a real studio. And but yeah, you can find me on Instagram. Anyone can reach out to me anytime. I'm a pretty open book when it comes to just sharing what I do, how I can build value, because I just think attention spreads, right? If I just like give off good stuff, people are going to be like, this kid's awesome. And then if I create success stories, if I can get someone, or we already got a guy about to do a deal, but if I can create 10 people who are making 3, 4, 5,000 bucks a month, it's like, would that have been worth $300? Of course it would, but I need to prove it first. I'm not a cash grab dirtball. I know you see there's too many of these people, man, that are like, they're making more money selling this stuff than they are actually doing it. And that bothers me. It's like the Massachusetts Association of Landlords. He's the head of all landlords. He owns a triplex. It's like, bruh, not that there's anything wrong with owning a triplex, but you're like representing all landlords. There's something about that. Or a guy who he owns a couple, three families, and he's making $2,000 a month, and now he's selling a course on that for $99 of just regurgitated real estate stuff that he finds online. That stuff bothers me. So it's like, I really want to provide real value to people in something that's different, in an opportunity that's real. Because then eventually guys like Pace Moby are going to have to call me and be like, what are you doing, kid? I know it's going to happen.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I want to partner with you or bring you in some kind of way. But yeah, man, I know what you're trying to do. Proof of concept, so then you can use that. One, it works. So now it's definitely worth charging for. I mean, from what I know, what I've heard, what I've seen, I can tell you it's worth charging for. And I agree with you, man. That's like the rampant thing right now. Is there's so many people selling courses or coaching or whatever it is. You could easily charge over $400 a month, because that would be right around 5 grand. I've attended so many webinars, I can't tell you, just because I'm a big researcher and I want to know what's going on. I want to know what people are doing and take from here and there and to put it all together to create kind of like the perfect scenario. So I've been on a lot of calls and people are charging. It seems like $5,000 is like the standard. Every time I've asked, or they tell you how much it is, they're like, "Oh, it's 5,000. Oh, it's 5,000." Of course, there's a lot of other things out there that are definitely a lot higher than that. People that do one-on-one coaching are charging like 10 or 15 or, even more. Just depends on what it is they're doing.
Yeah, I know. But for me, like, I don't know, unless it was like a big company, like 15,000. Like, listen, if you already owned a few of these and you were having problems with the city, or because I paid $12,000 once to talk to a guy for an hour, and he gave me a copy of a lease, like a commercial lease that probably saved me 3 or 4 grand right there. And then he gave me this high-powered attorney's phone number that got me, dude, that has saved me so much money. You know what I mean? Like that one
Yeah.
thing saved me so much money. But I'm in a position where I already had a real estate company. Like I can benefit from it. To take somebody's life savings and then find out, like, yeah, this is a good real estate strategy. Like, do you have access to investors or can you make money? No. Well, if you're $250 a month or something, it's worth getting in, because I'm going to start bringing on like other guests. Like my father-in-law owns 400 other units outside of the fact he owns 50% of my company. And then just networking and getting really cool people in who, because people will ask me, Dan, how do I raise money to do this? I'm not the money raising guy. But then some other kids like, why don't you get people in here who are good at it? I'm like, oh yeah, duh. I'll just use the leverage to get people in, because I'm not a fraud to be like, well, how I raised the money was this. It's like, well, I can tell you my story, but you guys might be able to teach me. Like I've actually been learning since I did this school group about sub two. Dude, I didn't even know what it was. I'm like, you guys are
Oh, I love it.
like assuming a mortgage is a real thing. I'm like, why the hell would anyone do that? And then they're explaining to me like they're paying two mortgages, they're desperate. And I'm like, oh, that actually, so someone from the real estate Goldmine group was taught me that. I'm like, oh, this actually is pretty cool, you know?
Yeah, it's working out in so many ways. So even though you're not charging for it now, you're learning stuff from them. They're learning stuff from you. But it's going to bring, like you said earlier, you're going to get deals out of it. I mean, I told you earlier before we started this that if I can find another building, I'm definitely going to be coming to you and seeing if you want to partner on that, because you obviously have the systems, the processes, the resources on that end. So if anybody can find a good building, they could probably bring it to you.
They could. And what I always preach though, when people get in, is find me the operator, I'll find the builder. Like that's,
Yeah.
so it's like, find me the people that are willing to write the checks if they need property, and then we'll go do that, because that's the miserable part of the work. Because it's so easy to find well, depends. If you're doing drug detoxes and stuff like that, where zoning is big, then yeah, you got to find the property first. Because then I have brokers that I pay a ton of money to find the operator. But yeah, like look at operators, look at properties, and if anyone wants to partner with me, yeah, reach out. Like, why not? You could even make a commission out of it. I've paid people commissions on the lease or something like that. Someone brings me an operator, I do a deal with them. Either they want a small piece of equity, or I'll just pay you a percentage of the lease. So if it's a 5-year lease at 5,000 a month, dude, the man, you might walk away with 10, 12,000 bucks. You didn't do anything. You didn't wholesale nothing. You did nothing. You just provided me value. That's what it was
Yeah.
worth to me.
That's what I love about this industry is the collaboration that can happen, the different ways that you can get into this. But yeah, man, I appreciate having you on the podcast today. I
Thank you
can't
so
wait.
much.
Yeah, thank you. Can't wait for this one to drop, and I'll make sure to post it in the Face Morbies group on your post as well. And again, appreciate it, man. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure you check the show notes or description in the YouTube video on my channel, Wiregrass Veteran Realtor, for different links and resources on how to start, manage, grow, and scale a business, as well as resources for real estate agents and investors. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for joining me on the Real Estate and Business Success Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's insights and are ready to apply these strategies to your own business endeavors. If you found value in the episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit. Stay tuned for more interviews with successful entrepreneurs and actionable advice to drive your business forward. Until next time, keep pushing for success, and remember, success is just around the corner.